Welcome, everyone. This is Glenda Dawson, and you're watching Glenda's Dragon's Den. I wanted to say thank you to everyone who comes and watches this program every week and allows us to bring you different perspectives and for all the emails and messages that receive. So thank you for that. And I'm hoping you're having a great week. Uh, this is a great time of the week. Wednesday, you break the week up and you get a break and you enjoy something that is also informative, right? You never know what you're going to get, you never know what you're going to hear, and it's definitely right for you. So tonight we have a phenomenal guest who has learned not only to use his experiences but also incorporated into science and therapy and basically incorporating different aspects to bring full healing. So, Dr. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing great, Glenda. Thank you for having me on the show. And
Thank you.
I've got to say that intro was amazing. You know, with headphones on, it was just very epic, and felt like I should start throat singing or something in the middle of it. It was really inspirational. So thank you for that. That really got the
Thank,
energy up to a great place.
thank you. Thank you. So, tell us all about you.
Oh gosh. Where do we start? Do we go forwards back or do we go back forwards?
Back
Um,
forwards, I guess.
okay, so um, I was born in Southern California. We moved up to the Pacific Northwest when I was young. Um, my home life wasn't necessarily the the most stable, and yeah, I had a father that was fighting a lot of his demons from his past. He had a pretty rough um, coming up. His father died in an early age. There was a lot of things that went on, and unfortunately, a lot of those challenges carried into my childhood. Um, so I found Boy Scouts, and
Mhm.
I found, oh my gosh, the goalpost doesn't move. There's some stability. There's some good male role models here, and so I really dove into that pretty hard. I was fortunate enough that our assistant scoutmaster was an indigenous elder of the Nez Perce people, and
Mhm.
so where I grew up in Lewiston, Idaho, our the Nez Perce Nation was right next door in Lapway, and so a lot of the kids were running to get off the reservation and assimilate. I was running to get on because I was so fascinated by the traditions and
Mhm.
in the ancient ways. And Elmer was just an amazing mentor, and I think he sensed what was going on at home. Um, and so he taught me so much about how to forage, how to find medicine, in the plants that grew, how to trap, how to hunt, how to be in community with nature and not take it for granted. Yeah, Elmer was working on reintroducing the freshwater eels back into the Snake and Clearwater rivers. The lampreys were almost extinct, and so he really single-handedly reintroduced that back into back into the waterways of Idaho and Washington. Um, so he really planted a lot of seeds for me.
Mhm.
You combine that with, I was a professed nerd in middle school. Dungeons and Dragons was huge for me, and I,
Mhm.
again, it was another kind of safe place for me to go, and it was also very expansive as far as looking at things other than the kind of the script that was being presented. So
Right.
learning about different mythologies um, and all of those things that were more than just what we could see right in
Mhm.
front of us was that was really helpful in helping. me navigate some tricky things in childhood and early adolescence. Um, I I was awarded my Eagle Scout a couple of weeks after I turned 15, and
Nice.
after that, Elmer said, "Okay, it's time for you to go on your vision quest." And so he took me through a traditional Nez Perce vision quest so that I could meet my Waiakan or my spirit guide. And so that was very transformative early on in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And then we also had in my high school we had a lot of suicides, and so they surveyed our student body and asked. Um, who do you talk to when you have challenges? And the names that appeared most frequently were all gathered together, and we were put through a certified peer specialist course. So typically, a CPS course is for behavioral health therapists and folks that work in detox centers and substance
Mm-hmm.
uh, use disorder clinics. But they needed something, and so they pulled us through that. It was 40 hours worth of didactic, and then we went on a retreat and had 40 hours of practicum, and then we embedded back into our student body as peer support. And as a result, suicides went down. We interceded in a couple of potential shootings,
Right.
and so that was my first introduction into mental wellness
Mm-hmm.
and coaching um, and then I turned 16, discovered alcohol and booze and cars, and went on the hedonist path for more than a minute, and ended up enlisting in the Army. I turned down a West Point appointment, and there was a mix up on an Air Force scholarship, and so to punish the Air Force, I enlisted in the Army, and went on to in a relatively short period of time. I went on to be on a special forces team, a special forces military intelligence um, company, and we did uh, intelligence gathering collection during the mid and late '80s during the Pablo Escobar days, and so
Mm.
um, definitely learned some things there. I
Mm.
learned that I wanted to live long enough to be on this podcast, and
There you go.
so I I took a green to gold scholarship, and I really wanted to be a pilot. So I went to an aviation school, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and majored in aeronautical engineering. Had big plans to be a pilot. Um, these are the days before LASIK, and my astigmatism did not agree with that career path. And
Mm-hmm.
so Uncle Sam, in his infinite wisdom, said, aeronautical engineering, you'll make a really great infantry officer. And so I ended up being an infantry officer for a number of years after that. Went to Bosnia as a part of the implementation force after the signing of the Dayton Peace Accord. I did a lot of uh, really a lot of de-escalating, negotiating, helping to bring about peace. We brought around the first democratic elections that country had seen in who knows how long, and also um, started recognizing the toll of the secondary trauma and being in these very high pressure. It wasn't high intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was definitely a different kind of pressure. It was the low pressure. We're in a country the size of Maine that's got 5 million landmines in the ground, and so
Right.
it's just a different kind of ticking in the back of your head.
Right.
Uh, I went and taught at officer candidate school. I was a TAC officer and a senior TAC, and throughout my military career, I was always the guy that volunteered to go for the substance abuse classes, the family support group classes, anything that had to do with psychology and how the mind works. Uh, I I would be the one to volunteer and took on a lot of those additional roles during my military career.
Mm.
Um, Stepped out of the military, did a lot of veteran advocacy work when I got out, and uh, recognized that there were a lot of well-intended people that were caught in systems and structures that weren't necessarily supportive to them being able to help the way that they wanted to.
Right.
I'm trying to tiptoe through this as eloquently as I can. Saw a lot of people. So by this time I was living in California, saw a lot of veterans coming back from the Middle East, going to the VA, and unfortunately they were walking out with shopping bags full of pharma and were being put on what I call the polypharmaceutical lobotomy. So many medications being given to not really addressing issues, but just numbing, attempting to numb. And I recognized that wasn't the solution. So that started me on my path to seek alternative ways to bring deep healing. So I did a lot of work with cannabis to help veterans wean off of opiate addictions, because unfortunately what we were seeing, in the 2000 to 2010 timeframe was, prior military members would go to the VA, they would walk out with their shopping bag full of pharma, and they had SSRIs and SNRIs and benzodiazepines and Doras and opiates. And these are the days of Oxycontin, and Oxycontin was being handed out like Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
And so many veterans found that they could take the Oxy and it would reduce their physical pain, their neuropathy, and it would also knock them out at night so that they could sleep and not have night terrors. And so it would work for a while until it didn't, until neurochemistry changed, because Oxycontin is a real sticky, twisted blend of synthetic opiates and synthetic codeine analogs, and plant medicines. If we look back at when we had Vietnam veterans come back and they were addicted to morphine, they could go to the VA and the VA would put them on morphine and they would get to a place of homeostasis, because morphine was still relatively plant derived back then, and the plant medicines have checks and balances in them, and there comes a kind of an interplay with the human metabolism to where they'll hit a homeostasis and a level. Now it might be enough to knock out a mule, but they could still function. With these synthetic derivatives, those checks and balances were stripped out, and so there was a continued change in neurological function, and neurochemistry changed. Tolerances went up, efficacy of the medicine went down. So then veterans would go back to seek an up in their prescription.
Right.
VA would level them off. They would start scoring Oxy on the street. Back then it was $8 to $10 a pill. Now it's $25 a pill. And then they would figure out, a tar ball of heroin is $1.25. Okay, and so then they would roll over and start using heroin. And so that was really creating this very significant problem. And now fentanyl has exploded that even further. And again, people seeking resources and tools to survive. The utilization of a substance, whether it's alcohol or these painkillers, was really a survival instinct. There's so much pain going on, physical and emotional and mental. I need something to help me navigate it. And so, so what I came to realize is it's not a moral failure. It's not a lack of determination. It's not a lack of willpower. It's a lack of understanding what the root causes of the trauma are. And it's a system that doesn't necessarily address what the root cause is. And it's also not necessarily understanding how we can use the prefrontal cortex to reprogram the amygdala or the subconscious. And so, so this is kind of forward looking back to those times. And so, so we started off using cannabis to help veterans wean off of opiates. And so we would look at a pretty aggressive step down protocol. Um, the because the methadone clinics and the Suboxone clinics, what I observed was they weren't necessarily interested in helping people wean off of the medicine. They
Mhm.
just wanted to convert to be the above ground drug dealer instead of
Right.
the underground drug dealer, right?
Right.
Because you work with a methadone clinic, and if they've got a compliant patient,
Mhm.
they don't want to lose that patient because that's revenue. And
Right.
so, the revenue
Exactly.
tick, 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 tick. And oh,
Mhm.
well, if we wean him and get rid of him or her, now we've got to fill that seat. And if we've got to cycle through 7 or 8 non-compliant patients, well, that's a lot more work on us. And so
Right.
there's really a conflict of interest for their financial model to help people get better.
Mhm.
And saw that a lot. And that was really disheartening about the medical system and the structure of the way it was. And so we started using cannabis to help people wean. We
Mhm.
had a dispensary. Again, I was in California at the time. We had a dispensary that was owned by a Vietnam vet that had kicked his morphine addiction using cannabis. And so now I grew up Nancy Reagan, just say no. My time in the 80s was, counter drug work. We were
Right.
taking down Pablo Escobar and that whole thing. And so, but things weren't making sense. They weren't lining up. Um, if you look at Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, there was a little bit of the awakening that happened.
Mhm.
So something doesn't line up, and so
Right.
then there was the call. Okay, let's investigate. Let's look. Found the Nixon study on cannabis, that had been suppressed for so long, and it's like, oh, actually, this isn't neurodegenerative; it's neuroprotective, and it was in the Americana Pharmacopoeia up until 1933, and all of these things were like, ooh, something's not right here. So we did the deep dive. We helped a lot of heroin addicted former service members
Mhm.
overcome their addiction. And we also found that when patients medicated about a half an hour before coming in for talk therapy, then it reduced their visceral triggers, what we now know is the sympathetic nervous system response.
Right.
So if we look at the autonomic nervous system, you've got the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Your sympathetic is the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fornicate, right? Those are the five
Mhm.
F's of the vagus nerve. And then you've got the parasympathetic, which is your rest, digest, and restore.
Right.
And so, um, the heroin synthetic derivatives, the oxy, um, hyper triggered the fight response in many cases.
Mhm.
And so the cannabis, we found that the cannabis slowed that down. And so the then the triggers we could start unpacking what was around the triggers because we were able to take that response, slow it enough to be able to get in and work through it. And so that started me on a path of exploration, and
Okay.
also um, my vow that I wasn't going to sacrifice my soul on the altar of big pharma in order
Mm.
to be a medical provider.
Right.
And I've got a lot of brothers and sisters that are MDs and DOs, and I have a phenomenal amount of respect. And there are those that have pursued that route that are just caught on the hamster wheel of what big
Mm.
pharma is telling them. And
Mhm.
so I just at that time I felt very injured and very betrayed by the Western medical system
Mhm.
and big pharma, and so I chose a different route. So I took a naturopathic route to and ultimately culminate in my uh, in a doctorate in functional medicine, but from a naturopathic route. Um, and in that exploration, lined up a lot more with the information that I was assimilating and bringing together, and with the desire to bring all aspects of wellness together.
Mhm.
That's where we I view things that there are three major components to wellness. There's physical, physiological is
Mhm.
one leg of the stool. There's mental, emotional, psychological.
Okay.
That's the second leg. And then there's spiritual / community, and that's the third leg.
Mm-hmm.
And if we, if you try to sit on one leg of a three-legged stool, that's a pretty tough balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
Or if one leg is really long and the other ones are short, well, that's not a very effective, stable place to rest. And so all three need to be worked on concurrently in order for people to truly find their wellness and healing. And so that's what we integrate into the work that we do now, is recognizing that all three of those aspects need to be addressed for
Mm-hmm.
people to fully find healing. If the whole concept of chemical imbalance in the brain, there's not a single test. Yeah, it's a theory. There's not a test that shows what your balance is or your imbalance is in your brain.
Right.
So that's from my view, that's a lot of blah blah that's put out there to sell more synthetic pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at the data, um, typical first line of defense for depression or anxiety is prescribing an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Well,
Mm-hmm.
SSRIs are only 15% more effective than sugar pills in
Mm-hmm.
multiple blind studies, yet there is a 50% chance of major adverse reaction. So I don't know many things out there where 15% chance of success, 50% chance of semi to fully catastrophic failure, yet
Right.
that's the first line of defense. Any prescriber that would be willing to hop on an airplane with a 15% chance of arriving at your destination and a 50% chance of a major adverse event likely wouldn't get on that
No.
airplane.
No.
But yet we've been programmed to believe, okay, well, here, do this. And then if there are two of those that are prescribed and they don't work, now there's a diagnosis of treatment resistant
Mm-hmm.
depression. And so there's a lot of things in the system that just didn't correlate. And then for my tribe, military members, and I include that first responders, law enforcement, their family members, suicide rates continue to tick up and up and
Mm-hmm.
up and up. And so those were a lot of the things that motivated me to get in and do the work that we do now, which is helping traumatized populations find healing, and then from healing, so we get out of survive mode and then we get into thrive mode, and we help raise sense of
Mm-hmm.
self. We help people reprogram from being externally motivated to being internally motivated, because there's so much conditioning that we're put through to be externally motivated,
Right.
externally focused. And and we're taught that, well, you're not really serving unless you're sacrificing. So those two definitions get
Mm-hmm.
conflated. And oh, you got a Valor Medal? Oh, where's your Purple Heart? Oh, did you really earn that
Right.
Valor Medal? I mean, just some of these narratives that happen, that when we step back, how can we expect leaky lifeboats to get people to the shore? Yet that's the culture that's being
Mm-hmm.
forwarded in those that are taking that step to serve. So a lot of the work we do is to help unwind some of those
Mm-hmm.
narratives, and many times those narratives existed long before people joined the military, or law enforcement or first responders. And in most cases, having those early childhood traumas really is almost a prerequisite to be in special operations, or be in some of these services. Um, so our work is to not only address the traumas that came from the job, but also to go back in, find the roots of those traumas, and then gently pull those out, and allow all of that to move away so people can heal, and feel valued and feel comfortable in their own
And
skin.
probably get empowered for the first time in their life.
In many ways, yeah. Yeah, I can tell you my thought process was, okay, my childhood was really
Mm-hmm.
effed up. So um, I'm going to go save other
Right.
people. So somehow that's going to set the record straight. And so there was part of that. And also I wanted to earn
Mm-hmm.
validation. Uh, and so I went into the military, I went special operations thinking, okay, if I'm in this apex organization, they've got it all together, because we've been told the military is honor and
Mm-hmm.
integrity and everything's fair and it's just and there's
Mm-hmm.
integrity. And so and there are going to be people there that will mentor me and bring me through the rite of
Mm-hmm.
passage. And then when we get there, in many cases in the food chain, went looking for the same thing. They didn't find it either, and shit rolls downhill. And
Mm-hmm.
so now, there's in many cases this almost a Lord of the Flies type hierarchy,
Right.
but at least it's community. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's better than maybe a lot of places we came from. And then when we get out, or if we get broken or we get wounded, and we're no longer of service to the machine, then we get chucked out like a cardboard box full of puppies behind a Dollar General.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, oh, go figure it out.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that and whether it's veterans, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's first responders, whether it's their families, even with those trauma bonds, there's still relationships there. And then boom, out we go. And
Right.
now what? And um, so and then there's a lot of mistrust,
Mm-hmm.
and especially the guys in white coats and degrees hanging behind the wall. Well, I know better. Well, have you experienced this? Well, no. And have
Mm-hmm.
you taken any of these medications you're pushing across the desk to me? Well, no. No, there's nothing wrong with me. So then
Right.
then that creates, well, how can I trust you? So
Right.
so our goal is to gather people with lived experience, uh,
Mm-hmm.
help them find their healing, and then those that are called, then we go back for our brothers and sisters that are still struggling with their woundings.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, in the military, EMTs, police, you see the worst. You get to experience really humanity at its worst. They don't tell you that when you sign up, but it's really what happens. And then you come back and they say, okay, well, you're done. You're done with your contract, 4-year contract. Okay, goodbye. Send you off, but they don't really give you any support to reintroduce you
Yeah,
into this new life.
yeah. There are programs. There's transition programs.
Hmm.
TAPS and things like that. But really, that's when I went through, it was to check the block. Okay, did you
Right.
turn in all your gear to CIF? Did you have a place to live? Okay, well, if not, here's a phone number you can call to talk to somebody. I mean, there
Right.
there wasn't any unwinding, and
Hmm.
you know, and and I understand the indoctrination because when I was a TAC officer at Officer Candidate School, we were taught how to break people down and build them back up in a particular structure.
Hmm.
For Officer Candidate School, many times we had senior enlisted that maybe had 12, 15 years in the military. They would come through because they wanted to go from being a non-commissioned officer to being an officer. And so we had, or we were tasked with breaking them down from being a non-commissioned officer, which is more, tactical boots on the ground, what needs to happen tomorrow, and
Right.
building them into officers, which is more strategic vision. Okay, what's the overall mission, not just the immediate task at hand. And
Hmm.
so there is a different thought process there.
Hmm.
Um, and the tactics that we use to disassemble and reassemble were very much indoctrination. There's no other word for it,
Hmm.
um, because we needed to bend their will to where they were compliant with what they were being told. And again,
Right.
now they're being programmed to be externally motivated. You look, uh, and you would see it when I was in the military. We wore our rank on our collars, and then you had your unit patch on one side, and your tabs, Special Forces, Ranger,
Mm-hmm.
Airborne, and then you had your combat patch on the other side, and then you had your little HUA badges, the different schools that you'd been to, and so there was always a measuring. As soon as you see somebody, okay, you're looking for rank, you're looking for their branch. Are
Mm-hmm.
they are they combat arms, or are they support? You look, okay, what tabs do you have? Who'd you go to combat with? And so so it's this whole measuring. Where do I fit into the food chain compared to you? And
Mm-hmm.
then okay, a special forces captain, in his mind, it has more importance than maybe a supply major. And so there was this kind of official ranking and then unofficial ranking,
Right.
but then you're out of that. So now what?
Mm-hmm.
Where do I fit in?
Right.
And so there can be so much struggle with that, because then there's a lack of connection, there's a lack of purpose, there's a lack of focus, and then there's also the whole concept of moral injury. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the organizations that I work with, we are working on um, uh, we're working on getting moral injury included in the DSM-6, because moral injury is different than post-traumatic stress.
Right.
It's different than military sexual trauma. The Venn diagram, there's a lot of overlap, but moral injury has its own symptoms and its own um, indications that don't necessarily line up with traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, with the current system, if there's not a diagnosis code, if there's not an ICD-10 code, then
Mm-hmm.
there can't be a CPT code or a treatment code,
Right.
which means that there's no money assigned. And so people are being misdiagnosed so that they can get some kind of help, but not necessarily getting the proper help that they need to address the moral injury, which is a soul wound. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and so yeah, there's a lot that we're working on, Glenda, to try to help folks find healing.
Well, good. And I love the fact that you're integrating not just the therapist side of it, but you're also integrating the ancient healing modalities, and you're trying to uh, get everything so everybody, you, these soldiers, say, the ex-military, can see that it isn't just one way. You have all these tools. Why don't we use all these tools? And it's very admirable. Not too many people like to stick their head out there against pharma and and do what you do. So how do people get in touch with you? If do they just are you just listed as one of the sources when they come out, or what?
At this point, it's been word of mouth.
Right.
So because of so you're right. We do take a multimodal approach, and
Mm-hmm.
so part of the challenges we run into is when we apply the scientific method, which is fine for experiments, um, but when we apply the scientific method to mental wellness,
Mm-hmm.
we're each our own beautiful, unique individual creation. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the, Statistically, it's a 1 in 700 trillion chance that you exist. It's a 1 in 700 trillion chance that I exist in the form that we are, in the time and the place we are. So
Right.
we're all walking miracles, and we're all very unique. We all have our own unique 100 billion brain cells. Yours are different than mine, and so the permutations of that, we have I have trillions of unique neurosynaptic connections compared to yours. And so to think that we can put everybody on an assembly line, or create this jiffy lube of mental wellness, it just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work.
Right.
you know you don't you've got these beautiful masterpieces in the Louvre. When they go to clean and restore those pieces, they don't just put them on a dishwasher assembly line and run them through a dishwasher and send them out the other side.
Right.
They're priceless, and each one needs a special set of tools to help optimize it. And we're the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, saying, oh, well, we want to change one variable and look at one outcome. That's like trying to feed the continent of Africa one grain of rice at a time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we've got 20 to 45 veterans and first responders committing suicide every day.
Mm.
And so, our approach is let's stack everything that's not contraindicated together,
Right.
and let's see, if this one thing is 14%, has a 14% efficacy, and this thing has 27% for Lance. But then another thing has a 28% efficacy plus a 16% efficacy for Glenda. Well, we're still stacking, we're still increasing our probability of success by bringing so many things to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And so we approach with a lot of different modalities as a part of our care. There's pre-integration work. We run retreats where we introduce a lot of different modalities, concepts, ancient teachings, modern technology. We bring in breath work that is a
Mm.
combination of Qigong and Kundalini and some of Wim Hof and Stan Grof's work. So
Oh yeah,
that's it. That's
that's a
integrated
must.
together.
That's a must.
Well, breath is everything.
Right.
We can last, for months without, or at least a month without food. We can last for days without water.
Right.
We can't last very long without breath.
No.
And so we've got to really work on regulating that. And so we bring in breath work. We bring in yin yoga.
Mm.
Bessel van der Kolk wrote a really great book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about how we store trauma in our fascial network. And so
Mm.
yin yoga allows us to get in and stretch out the myofascial complex and release a lot of that trauma from our body's memory banks. So we
Mm-hmm.
integrate that. We do bring in different concepts. So we work a lot with David Hawkins' levels of consciousness. We bring in Dick Schwartz' internal family systems. We bring in Shirzad Shamin positive intelligence. We bring in some of Tony Robbins' work on positive conditioning,
Mm-hmm.
and we draw from all of these resources and we present them. We utilize stroboscopic light therapy. We use vibroacoustic sound therapy. We use sound healing. We bring in Norse and Tuvan throat singing, all of these things that create these different experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and really create this buffet of resources. And then we wrap that with very robust integration. And then we do use various plant medicines.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, some are some of it is just optimizing gut health, and so we look at some of the foods that folks take in, and we look at eliminating things that are highly inflammatory,
Right.
and teaching about those things, because the gut is the second brain. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we utilize ancient plant medicines like blue lotus and
Mm.
Amanita muscaria, which was an indigenous medicine of Europe. We use Kana, which is a South African succulent. We utilize psilocybin cubinis, or psilocybin cubinis, and we do so in a way where these are all laced together and integrated,
Mm-hmm.
so that it's not just one thing, and
Right.
we do so in a way that's very approachable and gentle. There are a lot of folks in the psychedelic medicine space
Mm-hmm.
that take a wrecking ball approach, and very high loads, ultra flood doses of these medicines.
Right.
And our approach is, if we create safety,
Mm-hmm.
internal and external, and we do so by creating an environment where there's safety, love, and community.
Right.
And so if we do that and use those most ancient of medicines, safety,
Mm-hmm.
love, and community,
Mm-hmm.
then instead of trying to kick the door down, we can just check and see if the doorknob's unlocked. And so we don't need these big flood doses. We
Right.
can introduce people into relationship with these ancient medicines and these ancient healing techniques and modalities.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be wrecking ball work.
Mm.
And we also, we want to create a place where people can let go of preconceptions
Mm-hmm.
and be able to again explore, sample,
Right.
experience, and because we only know what we know until we know more.
Exactly. Exactly. And like you were talking about the wrecking ball, these are very specific professions, right? Jobs, whatever, where there was the wrecking ball, and it was one trauma after another, and that sense of danger constantly, and that being aware of what happens all around you. So the healing needs to be, like you said, nice and soft. If you're going to do with a wrecking ball, you're just adding another trauma to the body.
Very much so. I've unfortunately seen that quite a bit. It's um, and that's a beautiful insight. You can't fight fire with fire, or however
No.
we want to say that. And so, and when we are so imbalanced and we're in such a hyper vigilant state
Mm-hmm.
all the time, because when we're in that state for a long time, our amygdala, our central brain, our reptilian brain, however we want to call it, that's where your default mode network, your survival instinct, your
Mm-hmm.
subconscious, they're all synonyms for the same thing. It's the series of patterns that we implement on a daily basis to navigate through this human experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so that controls 90% of our behaviors any given day.
Right.
Our conscious mind lives in our prefrontal cortex here, and that only controls 10%. So if our subconscious or our default mode network baseline is chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and so then it's gonna try to put us back into that chaotic state, but we can't reset a chaotic baseline by introducing more chaos.
Right.
To your point, we need to bring things down and create a parasympathetic experience to allow that to settle back to factory settings, if we want to
Exactly.
call it that.
Right.
And and so what the medicines that we use provide is some pliability for that to happen, so
Mm-hmm.
that because the amygdala left to its own, you know, if things suddenly get calm, well, that reptilian brain's like, ooh, this doesn't feel normal. I don't like this.
Right.
And so then there will be self-sabotaging behaviors that will
Right.
come because it's just a matter of time. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to blow it up so I can go back to my normal,
Right.
even if it's miserable, because the amygdala doesn't have any strategic thinking. There's no moral scales. It's
Mm-hmm.
just what is my normal? What have I seen through the rear view mirror that got me here? That's what we're going to keep doing. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so the reprogramming, um, requires creating some pliability, creating a peak emotional experience to allow the neuroplasticity and also the pliability of the psyche to drop some of these survival tools and survival patterns and integrate thrive patterns. Um, so the medicines are not a silver bullet. There is no magic pill.
Mm-mm.
Uh, it the analogy that I like to use is if we think of our psyche as a piece of metal, and
Right.
over time it's gotten formed into the form that it is,
Mm-hmm.
and we say, you know what, this form was great for survival, but now I want to shift into thrive.
Right.
So I need to reform this thing. So you can hammer on it, cold hammer it, and over time you can mold it, but it
Right.
takes a lot of energy, it's a lot of noise, a lot of patience,
Right.
or we can have a peak emotional experience and the medicine can provide that. So that's like putting that piece of metal into a furnace and getting it
Right.
nice and white hot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we don't hammer it while it's white hot to get it into its new form, it's just going to cool off and be back in the same old form. And
Exactly.
so many people say, oh, well, I'm going to go sit with the medicine. Okay, so what are you doing after you sit with the medicine? You know, you stick the piece of metal into the forge and then you put it on the anvil. Well, okay, if you don't hammer it, it's just going to be the same thing when it cools
Mm-hmm.
off. So that's, that's the post medicine integration work, which
Right.
really is, that's where the healing comes in, is forming those new patterns.
Mm.
So thank you for letting me
Oh, please. It's just
go off
so
into that direction.
this is inspiring, and it's very hard to find someone who's willing to see it that way, because you know most most therapists that I know, most psychiatrists, most people who are in wellness, a lot of them just stick to medicine, and they just regular medicine. They keep prescribing. Let's change the cocktail once a year. They okay, now you need two of these and one of these, and all you're doing is keep stuffing the trauma down. You're not working through it, so you never really will get healed. Think you are, but all you're doing is just mixing a different cocktail for the next 12 months, and then another cocktail for another 12 months, or however long it takes you to realize that's not working anymore.
Well, and did it ever work to begin with is the big question.
Right.
You know, and my question is, how is it that the human race existed for so long and got here, but then somehow 150 years ago, um, we suddenly needed to be dependent upon all of these synthetic petroleum-based pharmaceuticals,
Right.
and our life expectancy and our quality of life has declined.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we step back and look, how is this making sense, and why is it that the plant medicines that we utilized for millennia are now suddenly bad for us?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's, and it's just, it 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 supersedes any politics. It's about power and control,
Right.
and those seeking to have control, which is, then if we look at it, there's fear and there's love, right? Those are
Mm-hmm.
kind of the two ends of the spectrum. Good and evil aren't even, those are just symptoms of fear and love, right?
Mm-hmm.
From our viewpoint, control is the child of fear, and
Mm-hmm.
then greed, lust, coveting, anger, hate, all of those things are the children of control, because all of those things are implemented because why? Because somebody wants control. Why do they want control? Because they're based in fear. It's a fear response.
Mm-hmm.
If we can shift over to the other side of love and loving kindness, then the children of loving kindness are things like bliss and love and empathy and compassion and wisdom and all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. So when we can get out of a reactive state, because reaction goes back to fear, and we can get into a response state, which comes from loving kindness, then we can start moving the needle of humanity towards a place where we can heal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we try to do, with those that we're fortunate enough to come in contact with and have trust us to navigate through those things. And then, hopefully when we can light that light inside of folks,
Mm-hmm.
then that light will hopefully light other light. And then just by the very nature of light touching light, that will push away the darkness,
Mm-hmm.
just by the nature of that communication of light and that inspiration of light. And we're talking about vibrational energy. That's how we
Right.
raise the vibration. You know, um, things of similar frequency and close proximity will resonate with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and that will create that connection. It's like singing bowls, right? You
Mm-hmm.
rub a singing bowl in that
Yep.
frequency, and it will create a
From the
sympathetic
other balls.
response,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we as humans can do the same thing. And it's funny when we talk to folks and they're like, "Oh, all this energy stuff, that's woo
Mm-hmm.
woo." And I'm
Right.
like, "So you don't believe in energy exchange? No." And so you got one of these? Because you're communicating with people around the globe using pure energy. So how
Right.
is it that this little thing that we that we built can
Mm-hmm.
transmit and receive energy, but you, this incredible 1 in 700 trillion biological masterpiece, you can't.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing though. You're taking all these people who come to you, you introduce them to all new experiences, and hopefully break that cycle of trauma. So when you heal them, then they don't carry that energy to the next generation, or at least they acknowledge it and say, wait a second, let me step back, let me try to correct that, or acknowledge my participation in that trauma that I created for somebody else. Because I'm sure that if your father realized or worked on his traumas, he wouldn't have created those that he did and had you experience. Uh, so I this is something that is very important, that not just for this generation or that person that you're healing, but the one that continues after that, or the people around them. Because I'm sure the wives and the families get affected just as bad as they do.
Oh, and absolutely. Secondary trauma is very, very significant, very challenging. And yeah, as a part of our program, we um, we have a loved ones cohort that runs parallel with the participants coming through.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that Amy and I experienced when I went through a deep healing retreat and I came back home. There were a lot of shifts that took place in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
You will hear it said, we can accomplish in 6 days what it takes 6 years of therapy to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so take that shift in 6 days, and that was really tough on Amy when I came back, because it was like, who are you and why are you wearing my husband's meat suit? you know and she thought I was just going to go away, and okay, some of my errant behavior patterns would go. But
Right.
no, there were seismic shifts
Right.
because it went to the root. So part of the support that we create is it's community support.
Mm-hmm.
There's education for the loved ones, because many times, if I'm a highly dysregulated former spec ops guy and I'm struggling with the alcohol addiction, and now my spouse, her identity is the one holding all that shit together, and
Mm-hmm.
she's the mediator, she's the mitigator, she's going through all of that. But then if I come back and now I don't need to be babysat anymore, well, then her identity is holy shit, what do I do now?
Right.
Because there's nothing more powerful in the human psyche than our sense of identity. And
Mm-hmm.
so now what? And so creating that support for those family members is just as important for everybody, because again, that's the influence, that the ones that are in direct connection with them. And yeah, I can tell you from my personal experience, my wife, my kids carried a lot of my poison until I was able to go dump my bucket out, and then I could come back and say, okay, let
Mm-hmm.
let me let me take that back. Thank you for
Right.
carrying that. I'm so sorry. And now I know how to dump it out. So let me have it. And oh, by the way, now I can hold space for you as you process through your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, we model that. We all heal ourselves,
Right.
but we're responsible for healing ourselves, but we can't do it alone. And
Exactly.
so we are we're building this community so people have a safe place to come and do that work.
That's wonderful. Now, people can email you if anybody's seen his show and is a person who's in the police department, EMT, or a service um, of the government or the army, the navy, whatever, military. Um, here's your email address so they could contact you. And if it's too far for you to where you're at, then I'm sure you'll be able to direct them properly, or there's so many ways of doing these things nowadays. So uh, we're about less than 5 minutes away from ending the show. Is there any last minute thing that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Although the military first responder population and their families are our
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, primary focus, it's not exclusive. We work with CEOs, we work with survivors of sex trafficking, we work with pro athletes. Trauma is trauma, and everybody deserves to have somebody walk alongside them to find their healing. And so, what we find is, because we have worked with such highly traumatized populations,
Mm-hmm.
there's a level of comfort where, okay, if we can, if Green Berets can come through and find their deep healing and roll out as these beautiful teddy bears, well, then maybe there's hope for me too. And
Right.
so, although we lead with that, that's not our exclusive patient population. And also, for those who are who need resourcing to be able to go through
Mm-hmm.
something like this, because obviously the standard Western insurance model doesn't cover this kind of deep healing work.
Right.
We do work with benevolent organizations that provide grants and scholarships to allow people um, to resource this.
Mm-hmm.
So don't, I guess my encouragement is, don't let perceived financial limitations keep you from seeking help. And if getting out to Colorado isn't viable, we've got a beautiful network of folks, and we can make sure that you're well taken care of, and at least have somebody to reach out to be able to start your healing journey.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for inspiring yourself and to do this type of job. This is it's a hard job to do, yeah, but you did it. You're doing it well. You're combining quite a few things together to do healing for the whole psychic, the whole body, not just the mental, not just the physical, which is very commendable. Well, thank you for being here. And as um, one person who likes to say to another, I like to combine Western and Eastern medicine. There's always that good combination. There is not one way to go. So thank you for taking that on.
Thank
And to our audience, thank you for being here. And we'll see you next week. Uh, just hold on a second as we say good night to everyone. And as always, many blessings. And I love you. Bye.